Baseball has always been a game of legends, but few figures embody both the brilliance and the turbulence of the sport, like Billy Martin. He was a man defined by contradictions, fierce competitor and tactical genius, yet also self-destructive and reckless. To some, he was a symbol of grit and determination, a fighter who squeezed every ounce of potential out of his smaller frame and unyielding spirit. To others, he was a troublemaker, a man who could not control his temper or his pride. But whether you loved him or despised him, Billy Martin left an indelible mark on the history of baseball. He rose from humble beginnings, captured glory as a player with the New York Yankees, and later led them to championship heights as a fiery manager. Along the way, he clashed with powerful men, fought his own demons, and lived a story that was as thrilling as it was tragic. This is not just the story of a baseball man. It is the tale of a flawed human being whose triumphs and failures continue to echo through the halls of Yankee Stadium and the hearts of fans everywhere. Billy Martin's story begins in the grit of the working-class world, where struggle was not an exception, but a daily companion. Born Alfred Manuel Martin Jr. in Berkeley, California in 1928, he grew up in modest circumstances, the son of an immigrant mother who taught him resilience by necessity rather than choice. Life was never easy, but perhaps it was this very adversity that carved into him a toughness that would later become his trademark. Baseball was not just a pastime. It was an escape, a dream, and a proving ground. Even as a boy, Martin displayed the kind of tenacity that set him apart. He was scrappy, undersized compared to other kids, but he compensated with an intensity that sometimes bordered on reckless. Coaches and teammates noticed early this was not a boy who would shy away from a fight, on or off the field. When the New York Yankees signed him, it wasn't because he had the physical gifts of a Mickey Mantle or the sheer presence of a Joe DiMaggio. He didn't have the natural grace that often defined the greats. What he had was fire. What he had was the will to fight for every inch of ground, to play every game as if it were the last he'd ever get. That spirit resonated with Yankees management, and it made him the kind of player that fans loved to cheer for. He wasn't flawless, far from it, but he was human in a way that made his victories feel like victories for the everyman. The defining moment of his playing career came in the 1953 World Series. The Yankees were chasing glory yet again, and Martin delivered in the most crucial moments. His bat came alive when it mattered most. His glove was steady under pressure, and his presence electrified the team. When he was named the series MVP, it wasn't just a recognition of statistics, it was the acknowledgement of a spirit that refused to quit. That October, Martin was not just a ball player, he was a hero. For fans who filled Yankee Stadium and for countless others listening on radios across America, his performance symbolized the heart of a champion. But the very qualities that made Martin so formidable on the field also carried dangers off it. His temper, his drinking, his unwillingness to back down from confrontation, they all conspired against him. Nowhere was this more evident than in the infamous Copacabana incident of 1957. Martin, alongside teammates like Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford, found himself in the middle of a brawl at a New York nightclub. In the public eye, Martin became the scapegoat. The Yankees, eager to protect their pristine image, decided to move him out. The trade to Kansas City was devastating for Martin, not only because it pulled him away from the team he had bled for, but because it branded him with a reputation: troublemaker, hothead, a liability no matter how valuable his contributions on the diamond had been. Yet Martin never gave up. His playing days wound down, but baseball was not finished with him. If anything, his second act as a manager would make him even more notorious than his first. When he began managing, first with the Minnesota Twins, and later with teams like the Detroit Tigers and Texas Rangers, it was clear that he had a mind for the game that few could rival. He understood strategy, he knew how to motivate players, and above all, he knew how to win. His approach was old school and uncompromising. hustle, discipline, and fight for every run. Players responded to him because they knew he was cut from the same cloth. He demanded everything, but he gave everything in return. It was with the Yankees, however, that his managerial legend was truly forged. Returning to the team as skipper, Martin took a roster filled with talent and controversy and molded it into a champion. The 1976 season saw the Yankees reach the World Series for the first time in over a decade, and though they fell short, Martin's leadership was undeniable. The following year, in 1977, his team captured the crown. The Bronx was alive with celebration, and for a moment, it seemed as if Billy Martin had redeemed himself entirely. His place in Yankees lore was secure. But peace was never Martin's companion. His relationship with owner George Steinbrenner was volatile from the beginning. Steinbrenner was a man who craved control, who demanded excellence but wielded power with a heavy hand. Martin, fiery and independent, was never going to bow quietly. Their clashes became legendary, not just for the ferocity with which they argued, but for how public they became. Add to that the combustible relationship with star player Reggie Jackson, and you had a recipe for disaster. The 1977 season, despite its ultimate triumph, was riddled with conflict. At one point, Martin pulled Jackson mid-game in front of a national audience, a decision that shocked fans and media alike. It was a statement, but it was also a spark that ignited deeper tensions. By 1978, the situation was untenable. When Martin famously remarked that one's a born liar, the other's convicted, referring to Steinbrenner and Jackson, the fallout was immediate. Resignation, or forced resignation, was the only path left. But this was not the end. Martin's relationship with the Yankees was like a toxic romance that neither side could abandon. Over the years, he would be hired and fired by Steinbrenner 5 separate times. Each return was greeted with hope, each dismissal with disappointment. No other figure in baseball history has been so closely tied to such a bizarre cycle of love and rejection. The tragedy of Billy Martin lies in this endless loop. He was too talented to be ignored, too flawed to be trusted. Steinbrenner could not resist bringing him back, but he could not endure keeping him for long. Fans adored his passion, but they also winced at his outbursts. Players respected his knowledge, yet often felt crushed by his volatility. Martin's story is, in many ways, the story of a man who could conquer the game, but not himself. And yet, despite the controversies, despite the repeated downfalls, his legacy endures. Billy Martin represents something larger than wins and losses. He is the embodiment of baseball's raw humanity. The game is often romanticized as pure, noble, and timeless. But Martin reminds us that it is played and led by human beings, full of flaws, contradictions, and passions. His triumphs cannot be separated from his failures, and perhaps that is why his story resonates so deeply. He was never a myth. He was real, painfully real, and in that truth, fans find both heartbreak and inspiration. As time has passed, stories of his fiery nature have become part of the folklore of baseball. Young fans hear about the manager who stood up to his owner, who benched a superstar without hesitation, who lived and died by the belief that baseball was war and every inning a battle. Older fans remember the thrill of 1977, the heartbreak of his departures, and the strange magnetism of his returns. His name still sparks debate. Was he great, or was he simply destructive? The answer, perhaps, is that he was both, and that is what makes his legacy enduring. In the end, Billy Martin's life and career remind us that greatness is rarely simple. He was a champion who gave everything he had to the game of baseball, and yet he was also a man undone by his own flaws. His victories were unforgettable, his failures undeniable, but together they form a portrait of a man who mattered deeply, not only to the New York Yankees, but to the very fabric of the sport. He showed us the cost of ambition, the danger of unchecked pride, and the beauty of fighting with every ounce of one's soul. For fans, his story is a cautionary tale and an inspiration, a reminder that heroes are never perfect, but often unforgettable. In Yankee Stadium, his name is still whispered with a mixture of admiration and regret. Billy Martin may have left this world too soon, but his legend lives on, not as a sanitized tale of triumph, but as a raw, complicated, and profoundly human story. And in that he found a kind of immortality that statistics alone could never provide.